Okay, so let's talk about Audience of One, um, where that was born out of, and why you chose the perspective of a dancer and a dance.
Hmm. It's just completely a metaphor. Like, I'm not a dancer, but it felt right. The verse of Audience of One is what came first. I will dance around it with joy you bring more than man's opinion. And I honestly wrote it thinking about my experience as a worship leader. And I, especially in my early years of leading worship, often felt the pressure of man's opinion. And it's like I was getting up on that stage and I was so afraid to disappoint, so afraid to let people down. Um, like that feeling of carrying all the balls, and like just an immense responsibility and also vulnerable. Like you're singing in front of a bunch of people, which can be scary in and of itself. But I had decided when I got saved, like my worship is for the Lord, and I don't care about my performance. And it being like very authentic is always like super important to me. So, anyways, I wrote Audience of One after maybe like some Sunday. I lived in my old house and I had been feeling the pressure of man's opinion and the fear of disappointing people. And I wrote that song as like an anthem for myself to sing, a reminder to myself to carry around in my pocket for when those moments of anxiety came as a worship leader, to saying, nope, I'm doing this dance for my Audience of One.
Mm-hmm.
He brings joy unspeakable, more than man's opinion ever could.
Mm-hmm.
So even if man applaud me, it's empty. And honestly, usually feels pretty empty, right? Like, good job getting compliments. It's like, thanks. But when God's like, I'm pleased, well done, my good and faithful servant, like that yes and amen is everything. So just to like remind myself of like, that's the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the lyrics of the song were so beautifully posited against it being portrayed as a dance, as a metaphor, because a dance can feel so beautiful and artistic and performative, and there's a product at the end of it if you see a show. But yet, a lot of these lyrics focus on kind of pouring yourself out, living a life laid down, serving, sacrifice, being patient,
Yep.
giving. That these aren't missteps.
Yep.
And I thought that that was an interesting contradiction that you made, where the end goal of this life with God is not some house on a hill, some production,
Yep.
some fame or massive significance by name.
Yes.
That kind of the end goal is these things along the way, these character builders. So
Yep.
why choose those things as steps in the dance?
Yes. So I knew that I wanted to build upon Audience of One and make it a full song. And so I started just like meditating on it and singing a lot in my car. And I got this like, there's no misstep melody. And then I was just thinking, what, hold on. I'm actually going to say Jen Tringal preached a message at a women's conference. And she said something like, there's no misstep in the assignment when you're serving someone. And she was saying, you might think you have this like grandiose destiny. You might think that like God's calling you to something big. But if you just say yes to the assignment, just be a Sunday school teacher, be an usher, just bring dinner to your neighbor, like whatever the thing is. She just like, just say yes to the assignment. And her ultimate point was like, God will lead you into bigger and bigger like responsibilities. If you're faithful with the little, he'll give you more. But I just took that idea and ran with it. Like, there's, as long as I'm pouring out, as long as I'm consecrating my life, as long as I'm loving my neighbor, waiting, intertwining myself with God, like these things, that I'm not missing the mark at all. I haven't missed it. I'm living in perfect destiny. I'm I am greatness.
Mhm.
Like we are greatness if we're living out of that place.
Mhm.
If the fruits of the Spirit are flourishing in our lives, we've achieved greatness.
Mm.
And there's not a future greatness that we have to strive towards.
Mhm.
So that reminder of I, as long as I'm
Mhm.
living out the principles of God and Jesus,
Mhm. Mhm.
then I haven't made a misstep.
We'll never not be called to these things.
Exactly.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
No matter how far we go, we'll never not be called to these.
So keep walking in those things. As long as it feels like a waiting season, as long as it feels like the in between, as long as it feels like I haven't achieved all that I hoped to achieve, consecrate, wait, serve, sow, tithe, give, and you're perfectly in the will of God.
So you touched on, but to reiterate, Galatians 5:22 makes its way into this song when you say, "Against such things there is no law."
Yeah.
So tell me about Galatians 5:22 anyway. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean, against such things there is no law?
Yeah.
In Galatians, it's talking about the fruit of the Spirit.
I used a different list.
You used a different list. The heart is the same. So tell me what that verse means and how it made its way here.
So that verse is saying there's no there's no boundaries on how loving you can be. There's no list of rules about how peaceful, how joyful, how much patience you're allowed to have. And I wanted to use that against these things there is no law on a list that's maybe more like doings. They're doing things instead of just like the fruits aren't, I guess they are doing, but they're like activities. I made a list of activities that you can practically wake up tomorrow and decide to sow, to give, to tithe, to intertwine yourself, which is the word waiting. Like they're practical steps that you can take when you might feel like you don't know what God's saying, you don't know the will of God, or you don't know why you're in this season for so long. I wanted to take the fruits of the Spirit, which are maybe more internal, like places, beings. It's like you're being joyful, you're being peaceful, you're existing in patience, you're existing in goodness and faithfulness. That's beautiful. Yay! Against those things there's no law. But also you can practically do these things in this. You can dance this way. If you do this dance, there's no law against it. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking of, before we talked about marriage, and we've also talked about parenting. And I feel like, if people aren't married or have children, they could think of their own parents or friendships that they have and apply. There is no limit to patience that you can give.
Yeah.
If you're in a struggling season with your spouse, there is no limit to long suffering.
Yeah. Yep.
So talk a little bit more about just on the practical sense of using the fruits of the Spirit verse, that Galatians 5:22, every day. What does that look like every day when your spouse says something, or your kids are trying you again, or you're struggling to obey your parents if you're still living in their home, to use the fruits of the Spirit?
Well, I'm just reiterating things I've been taught for this answer, but our pastor always says that the fruits of the Spirit are like a natural byproduct of the place where you're rooted. So fruit, you don't have to like look at a tree and say, grow apple, come on apple, come on apple. And people try to like push patience out of themselves in this way. And I don't find that to really work. But if I'm just more invested into being in my oneness, like just knowing where I'm rooted, the place where I'm seated, the place where I'm standing, the place where I'm grafted into the vine, I'm abiding, then the natural byproduct is going to be good fruit. And it might start out as a baby crab apple. Don't be disheartened if you're a crab apple. You'll grow. Like you'll grow into the fruit of the plant that you're on. You're going to bear fruit after your own kind. So you're going to bear Jesus fruit if you're abiding in him. So you can trust that without like a huge natural effort with your mind. Also, Nana Margie, she'll always say, if a thought comes that's not one of the fruits of the Spirit, just hold up your hand and say, it's not on the list. It's not on the list. Depression, it's not on the list. Despair, it's not on the list. Anxiety, fear, whatever the thing is. And I think that that's a good confession.